Bill, first reading.
Mr. Speaker.
Keith Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Head of State Referenda Bill now be read a first time. Mr. Speaker, at the appropriate time I intend to move that the bill be considered by the Justice and Electoral Select Committee. This is an important moment in our constitutional history. It is the first time that Parliament has had before it a bill that would enable the people of New Zealand to decide whether to continue having a member of the British royal family as our head of state or move to having a New Zealand head of state selected by a democratic process. The bill provides for a referenda process where, in the first ballot, New Zealanders would choose between three options: the present system, with the monarch remaining as our head of state, a New Zealand head of state determined by a 75% majority vote in Parliament, or a New Zealand head of state directly elected by the people via the SDV preferential system, where the successful candidate would be the first to reach 50% of the votes as the preferences are distributed. I have put all three options in the first ballot so New Zealanders can have a full discussion of them and make an informed choice. If none of the three options gets 50% in the first referendum, there would be a runoff referendum between the two leading options. The two alternatives to the monarchy in my bill are the two main types of non-executive president we see around the world. The German president, for example, is selected by a committee from the Houses of Parliament, whereas the Irish president is directly elected. I want to make it clear that a change from the monarchy would not, under my bill, result in a change in the technical powers of our head of state. That said, a head of state selected by a democratic process might feel that little bit more independent of the government of the day than the Governor-General, who is both appointed by the incumbent government and can, in effect, be sacked by that very same government. You could call my bill a minimal change bill. We wouldn't end up with an executive president like the American president. Some people have said, well, why bother if any change from a monarch would be minimal in its constitutional import? The answer is that I'm responding to a significant body of New Zealand opinion, particularly among those favouring a republic, who want us to get on with a referenda process. They don't want us to simply tail the Aussies and wait until they have had another referendum. The main argument for a republic in both New Zealand and Australia is one of national identity. The question many New Zealanders ask is, why should we have a head of state living on the other side of the world who is not a citizen of our country? There is also concern about whether our head of state should remain a monarch, that is, somebody who inherits the job rather than gets it through a democratic process. The rules of inheritance for the monarch in Britain are also controversial. At present, the succession rules discriminate against female heirs and Catholics in a way that is contrary to New Zealand's human rights legislation. At present, no one can ascend to the throne and become Queen or King of New Zealand if they are Catholic or even married to a Catholic. I would like to stress this debate is not about whether we like or dislike the Queen or any member of the royal family. The present Queen has been competent in the performance of her duties, and she turns 84 this very day. I wish her a happy birthday. However, the Queen is in a difficult position as head of New Zealand. Firstly, there is an inherent conflict of interest in the Queen being the head of state of two independent countries, Britain and New Zealand, who don't share the same foreign policy. For example, when Britain sent troops into Iraq, the Queen, as Queen of Great Britain, went down to the barracks in military dress to support the soldiers. That was in conflict with her role as Queen of New Zealand, a country which opposed that same war. Secondly, it is very difficult for the Queen to keep tabs on developments in a country on the other side of the world that she isn't able to visit very often. Sure, her representative, the Governor-General, lives here and is more hands-on, But the Governor-General is not fully independent because he or she is appointed by the government of the day and can be sacked by that same government via a government recommendation to that effect, which the Queen is in no position to refuse. Governors-General taking the government side can be a problem, as in Canada 2 years ago, where the Governor-General suspended Parliament for a time when the Conservative government was facing a no-confidence motion. Having a head of state who can operate with true independence is particularly important in our multi-party MMP system with its constitutional complexities. There is nervousness among some New Zealanders about changing from the present system. This is natural, but let me allay some of the fears. One is that a change might affect our commitment to the Treaty of Waitangi. I don't believe this is the case. Long ago, the responsibility for upholding the Crown commitments to the treaty was devolved to the Parliament and Government of New Zealand. The King or Queen of New Zealand is part of the mix, but since 1947, that position has been constitutionally independent from the position of King or Queen of Great Britain. The Queen, as Queen of New Zealand, takes advice solely from the Government of New Zealand. The agency that signed the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, the British Crown, no longer constitutionally has any influence whatsoever on the domestic affairs of New Zealand, including commitments to the Treaty of Waitangi. Another fear that people sometimes have is that our head of state, if our head of state is the subject of direct election, we might end up with a pop star or a celebrity or a political hack. I believe we should trust Kiwis to vote responsibly for such an important position. This is what happens overseas. Ireland has a directly elected president with minimal powers like those proposed in my bill, and the Irish people have elected appropriate heads of state, like the internationally renowned Mary Robinson, who went on to become United Nations Human Rights Commissioner. Members may have noticed that the Attorney-General has issued a report that my bill offends the New Zealand Bill of Rights in one respect. By keeping the same electoral roll for the first head of state referendum and the runoff referendum, my bill discriminates against those who might turn 18 in the 6 months between the two. I will be proposing to the Select Committee an amendment to correct this infringement. I'm appealing to those MPs who are not sure right now whether they support such a referenda process to at least allow consideration of it by the Justice and Electoral Select Committee. Even though it is a conscience vote in the Green Caucus and we don't all see the issues the same way, all of the Green MPs will be supporting this bill to Select Committee to allow both MPs and the public to fully debate the important constitutional issues embodied in this bill. I don't see this as a left or right issue. People across the political spectrum and across the community have formally endorsed my bill. They include Sir Robert Jones, Dr Ranganui Walker, Peter Mathias, C.K. Stead, Rod Hamill and Terence O'Brien. Whatever the fate of the bill tonight, the issues we are debating will not go away. The momentum for change and the momentum for a referendum on our head of state is building every year. It would be a tribute to this House if it faced up to the reality now and allowed this bill to go through to the Justice and Electoral Select Committee. And finally, I would like to pay tribute to the many in the community who are keeping this debate alive, from the Republican movement to Monarchy New Zealand to many concerned citizens and legal experts. I will continue to work with them on these issues, whatever the result of the vote tonight. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.